This is a quick tutorial on how to build a Power BI report based on a Vena data model. First, I launch our Power BI desktop application, and I'm starting from a blank report. Next, I want to connect to our Vena model. I'm clicking on Get Data in the menus. Now I'm presented with all the different data sources and connectors that we can use to pull data into Power BI. I'm scrolling down to Vena, and I'm clicking Connect. Next, I'm presented with a selection for the region. So this can actually be found by looking at the URL when you're logged into Vena through the web browser. So I'm going to select CA3. Note here, we also have the option to further filter down our data or metadata through a model query. For today's purposes, I'm going to leave it blank and retrieve everything. If this is the first time that you're signing in, it will prompt you for your credentials. So these API credentials can be obtained from your Vena administrator. Once connected to the tenant, you're going to be presented with all your different data models. So today we're going to be working with a data model called Demo Model Peak. Note once I expand the data model, I have access to all the different dimension tables within my data model. So note it does bring over the groupings and the hierarchies that you would create in Vena. We also have a table called values. So in this table, it contains all the different data intersections within our data model. So it's made up by all our dimension tables, and then in the last column, the values. I'm going to click on load. Now it's going to initialize the connection with Vena and start bringing over the different data sets and metadata from these tables. Note it may take a little bit depending on how large your data model is and how much data you have. It looks like most of the dimension tables have been brought over. Now we're just awaiting the data intersections in the values table. All right, you notice it's also trying to detect the relationships between the dimension tables and the values table. Once loaded, on the far right, you're going to notice your different tables and the fields within those tables. So let's begin. Let's say we want to start analyzing how well my products are doing. I can look in our values table. I'm going to first filter on product. I also want to look at it by account and the specific values. So notice in here, Power BI starts building a data table with what I've selected. It has the product, has the account, and has the values. Obviously, I don't want to cherry pick and locate all my revenue accounts. So what we can leverage is the relationship between the account dimension table with our values table. So I'm clicking on the accounts, and I'm going to filter on, I'm just going to drag this a little bit so we can see it, on level 2. So I know in level 2, it contains my parent members for revenue. So for example, I'm going to type in revenue and locate this parent. So note how once I filter on revenue, it's only going to now filter back to the revenue accounts. Further, I'm seeing some numbers in the no product for revenue. These revenue numbers may not be relevant for what I'm looking for. These might be tied to other subscriptions or other sales that we're doing. So I'm actually going to filter out the no product. So I'm selecting all products and unchecking no products. Likewise, next, I may want to look at our cost of goods sold. So I can rebuild another visualization, or I can copy the existing one. So I'm going to Control-C, I'm going to Control-V, and now in this second visualization, I am going to change it from looking at revenue to looking at our COGS member. Okay? So now we've got our revenue, we've got our COGS. So logically, what we may want to look at next is our gross margin, or gross profit. So I'm going to, again, copy this and paste it into a new visualization. Now instead, on this one, I may want to look at my level 3 to bring back the gross margin member. So I'm going to remove account level 2 and click on account level 3. I'm going to remove the filter. So it did do its job. However, note how the sum is looking and why. The reason why that the revenue is getting added with the cost of goods sold is because Vena operators are not yet brought over into Power BI. So what it's simply doing, it's summing up the children members beneath it. So because both our revenue and COGS accounts are stored in Vena as positives, mostly because when we do our budget and forecast, we want to do this in positive numbers, the gross margin is now going to be a sum. So that's an issue. How do we get around it? We typically create another measure in order to calculate some of these parent members or calculated members within our cube in Power BI. So instead of looking at values, I'm going to uncheck values here. Instead, now I'm going to build my own custom measure to calculate what it should be. So I'm right-clicking on the values table. I'm clicking New Measure. So now Power BI creates a new measure for me here. I can give it a name first. Okay. Profit, for example. In here, I can then write a formula in DAX language. So that is a Power BI or tabular database language, querying language that we could utilize. And I'm going to say, let's look at anything in our values table, in the values field, where the account level 2 is revenue. I'm going to subtract anything in the values table where the account level 2 is cost of goods sold to derive to my gross profit. Okay. So I'm going to click on gross profit. And note now we have the numbers we're looking for. Revenue minus COGS. So obviously right now, these numbers don't really make sense because we're not filtered on a specific year. We're not filtered on a specific scenario. We're not filtered on specific periods. So that introduces the concept of slicers. So for example, let's first bring over year. So I'm going to click off the visualization, click year, change this visualization into a slicer. So for some of these charts, I may want to remove some of the fields that are not required. So I know this is always going to yield the gross profit. So I'm actually going to remove this. I'm going to remove the account. Okay, so now I'm left with just the product and the gross profit. I'm going to move this slicer up. Okay, now note if I select 2019, all 3 of my charts are going to be updated along with when I make a change to the slicer. So now again, I might want to bring in the scenario as well. So note what it does, it's going to group the 2 into together. So if I want to, for example, look at my 2019 actual, this is going to give me my 2019 actual. I want to look at my budget. This is my 2019 budget numbers. Next common thing that we do want to look at is potentially the periods. However, because of the way that periods are stored in Vena as a separate dimension with the numeric values from 1 to 12, the best way to model this in Power BI is to convert this into a date field. So how I do that, I would create a new column by joining the period and year fields. So I'm right-clicking on values, clicking on new column. So I may want to call this my date field, for example. And here, I'm going to use a formula again to put together the year, period, to put together a date string. So now that that's created, I can use the same chart, for example. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to bring this over here. So for this visualization, instead of a simple data table, I'm going to leverage a line chart, for example. So note that with any other visualization, to change the format of it, it's simple as changing and clicking on a different graph or chart type. My revenue, I may want to represent that way. Okay. My COGS, I might want to represent in the bar graph. Okay. So of course, within each of these graphs, I can further format them, give it a more meaningful title. So if I know this one, for example, is revenue by product, I may want to change it to revenue by product, right? This one I know is my COGS. So here again, I can, okay, change this, update the title accordingly. So this one is COGS by product. In here now, I want to plot this so that I'm able to review this by month. So I can leverage this new hierarchy we created, change it to month. I'm going to drill down to one level further in our hierarchy. So notice this is giving me by month. There we go. Instead of looking at by product, let's say we want to look at things by customer, for example. So I can copy and paste the same chart here. Instead of looking at it by product, I can bring in the customer field instead. So again, the beauty thing of being able to leverage the roll-ups we've created in Vena. So for example, I know that I have my customers grouped by state. I can then now bring in the customer dimension and level 1 where the states are stored in order for us to build a map, for example. So in here, I can change the visualization to a map. I'm going to bring it in for level 1. Note now what Power BI does. So in here, I'm going to try to delete the date field here. So now we're essentially looking at it by state. We can see where the customers are. And if we do want to evaluate by product, we can simply bring the product back in as well. Now, let's say we've established our gross profit. We want to start looking at things deeper into our inventory. We may want to take a look at a metric like days inventory outstanding to see how long that takes in order for it to get sold. So we can compute this, again, in a similar way by using a measure. Okay. So I'm going to come into the values table, and I'm going to click on new measure. So in this measure, I may want to call it my days inventory outstanding. Again, a formula very similar to the one we've created before. We're using DAX language. Instead, what we're doing here, we're taking anything that's an inventory, we're dividing it by the cost of goods sold, and multiplying it by 365 to derive to our DIO. So I'm clicking enter. So now I can use this calculated measure, and I can present it in a card, for example. So now this is going to tell me that the turnaround for my products is 29 days, which is pretty good. Okay. So if I look at specifically a scenario, obviously this changes all the different visualizations along with it. What we can do is also throw in a Q&A. So what this does, it allows the user of the dashboard to be able to start asking questions relevant in the dashboard itself. So I may ask something like, what is my top product by gross profit? So obviously it says no product, and we know that we want to exclude that. So I may want to change up my question and accept no product, for example. So you can ask Power BI these type of questions to get to the specific data that you're looking for. Okay. So if I'm happy with this dashboard, I can decide to save this and publish this into the Power BI service, where I can then share this with other users in my workspace. So first step, I'm going to click on File. I'm going to click on Publish to Power BI. It's going to ask me to save the changes. I'm going to click Yes. Since I'm already logged in, it's going to ask me to publish this. So I'm going to publish this to my workspace. Select. Once it's done publishing, I can click on this, open my report in Power BI. What this does, it opens up the report into the Power BI service. I can then from here utilize the same visuals. Further, I can share this with colleagues of mine that belong in the same workspace. Note that you do need the Power BI Pro account or higher in order to do so. You can also embed this dashboard in other apps that I may have. Another feature I do want to show that I personally really like, go back to home here, go back to the workspace. When the report is here, I could further utilize something called Quick Insights. By clicking on that, Power BI is going to start analyzing my data and start trying to seek trends in the data that may be significant. So you notice there's something between its findings, gross profit for tablet has outliers. So there may be some specific deals or sales on a particular month that were higher. You've got things like no customer has noticeably more gross profit. So potentially these may, because we're selling to direct customers and not distributors potentially. So you got all types of insights that Power BI tries to read out of our data that we may have overlooked if we were analyzing the data by ourselves. With that, it brings us to a close of this tutorial and demo. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you to see how we can help you leverage Power BI to complement Vena and improve your business decision making.